Hi, Eliza.
Hi.
Thank you for being here today
You're welcome.
and making time for me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, anytime.
I was trying to remember how I found you because I was like, I found this girl like 6 months ago and I love her Siren series. And then I was like, how did that happen? Do you remember?
So I had oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank on her name. I literally have known her for so many years. I did a blog hop.
Oh,
And
was it
Amber. Yeah.
Amber Garcia, right.
Yeah. I feel like I've seen you though before that. I don't know, that may have been the first time that because I feel like your name sounded familiar. I don't know why, but you definitely sounded familiar. But yeah, so it was from that blog hub, and I think you messaged me on Facebook.
Yes, because I read your book and I was like, this is the first Siren book I've ever read and I love it. And yeah, you have to connect with me. So I was like totally fangirling. I was like, is she gonna message me back or not? So thank you. So let's just jump right in. Tell me, well, obviously people know you write fantasy now. What other genres do you write in? How many books do you have?
So, oh gosh, I always get this wrong. I feel like such an idiot too. I think I have 14 maybe. I'm trying to think. 13, 14 books. Maybe it's 13. I don't know. So I started off YA Epic Fantasy. That was the first series that I published with my publisher. Then I did a YA contemporary romance, which is probably the only one I'll ever do. And that was kind of like one of those stories that I just wrote it for me, like sometimes I do that. Like, I don't have a plan. I just like a story and I'm just going to publish it just for myself. And so Soul Spark was that story. It was just something I had in my head. I actually had an agent interested in that one, but I was between the general market and the Christian market. It was like I had too much Jesus on one end and then too much like drugs and like deeper content that wouldn't have, and so I ended up self-publishing. And then I have paranormals, like the other books that I do, so that's Shadows of Kiev, which kind of it borderlines between paranormal and historical fantasy because it's a book that takes place in Kiev in the 9th century. And it's Vikings, but what I did was for the lore part, I took Slavic myth and I made that the fantasy aspect. And then I dabbled in like a light sci-fi because again, I was obsessed with, oh, what the heck is that series? There was a series on Netflix that was kind of like, you remember the movie Inception? Mm-hmm. Where it's that light sci-fi, but it's kind of more like metaphysical type sci-fi. So there was a series on Netflix that was all episodic episodes, and I can't remember the name. And it was all those type of crazy concepts. So I created Dreamscapes, which was light sci-fi, and those are 2 books. And sci-fi is a really hard push in YA, I found. So I kind of just moved on. And then I think after that, it was Daughter of the Sun. And then I have my co-written stuff with my husband, which is dark because my husband's a potty mouth. But we had to meet in the middle somewhere. And that's like adult urban fantasy. So I think like for me, I dabbled a little bit more earlier in my career, I guess, to try to figure out where I really fit. And fantasy and paranormal is like my happy place. So I don't think I'll ever do contemporary again. I don't think I'll do sci-fi again. It'll probably either be one or the other in the future.
Very cool. And you mentioned these Slavic myths and legends. Do you get a lot of your inspiration from mythology?
So it depends on the story and kind of where I want to go. So for Shadows of Kiev, I, again, was obsessed with Vikings and I wanted to read a Viking novel and I wanted a hot Viking. And I came up with the concept because Vikings really are not scared of anything. And I thought, what would be the most scariest thing for a Viking? I'm like, oh my God, not getting into the halls of Valhalla. So an undead Viking became, you know, the conflict in that story. And when I was looking to add the lore, I just happened to have a book from the many trips to Borders where I used to just buy whatever kind of, you know, encyclopedia. And it's this big book on Slavic myth. And it's really dark. And I didn't realize how crazy Slavic myth is and their, you know, spirits and creatures. And it's, you know, it's like, they have a siren, but it's called the Rusalki. I'm not going to say that right. So that's usually what I do is I kind of figure out a concept and then figure out, okay, so now I've got my basics, my world. What am I going to pull in for the lore? For Daughter of the Swan, it started off with an idea, which was, you know, a daughter of a holy priest has to stop a necromancer. And then from there, I picked a time frame. Anytime lately when I've been doing paranormal, I like to do more historical paranormal. And I pick a time frame and then I research what's going on in that time frame. And from there, I will find something creepy. And so Port Tableau is actually a real mining town in South Wales that had stories of hauntings because of all the explosions in the mines. And so I sort of build off of a little bit of history. It kind of reminds me, if you've ever read, which is, if you haven't, it's an amazing book, Eaters of the Dead by Michael Crichton. It's, if you've seen the movie The 13th Warrior with Antonio Banderas, it's that story. And there's this part at the end of the book where Michael Crichton's talking about how he took the Beowulf legend and mixed it with Ibn Khaldun's real historical, whatever they call it, how, you know, they had like the first chapters of his story, who was a real character, and he kind of meshed it. And he said he doesn't even remember what's real, what's fake anymore. So that's kind of like what I like to do, is take bits and pieces and just kind of mesh it all together.
Well, that's very evident now that I'm like, okay, all these pieces are falling into place for me, the Daughter of the Song and her as a siren. It's very so since then I've kind of gotten on a siren kick, and I read Chris Barron's Sirens, and it's very, very different. It's an urban contemporary fantasy, and she mixes Greek mythology in it and all the Greek gods and goddesses and things like that. So it's been sort of like a new passion of mine. So
I don't think I've ever read a siren book, ever.
So your character is not you don't consider her a siren?
Well, you know what, when you said it, she is, because, and I guess I never really put it, because in my head I think of siren and I think of a crazy mermaid in the water,
Yeah.
you know, but she is, because her voice is her power. And that's the same thing with a siren. She's just not luring men to the dark depths of the ocean.
Right. So yeah, I guess, yeah, maybe so I put those words in your mouth, and that's what I took from it, because singing was her power.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Which is really
Very
cool. It's a fun story.
I love that you're in the Hobbit house as well.
Yep. If I could live in one for real, I would. I told my husband that my vision board is land, property, a donkey, a llama that I could hike with, maybe some chickens. And he was like, who are you? And I'm like, do you not see the background?
You need to come to Colorado. People hike with their llamas all the time.
Really? You know, I wanted to do that on our honeymoon in Massachusetts, and he looked at me like I was crazy. And I'm like, I don't understand. He's like, well, what do you do with them? Do you ride them? I'm like, no, you hike with them. And he couldn't even wrap the concept around his head. Like, I don't understand. I'm like, you just hang out. You just walk together. And he was like, no, I'm not doing that. I was like, all right.
Yeah, one time I passed this lady, she had it, and it might have been an alpaca. I'm not sure if it was the alpaca or a llama, but very similar animals. So he had like a leash harness thing on, or she, I don't know, just like a dog would. And and it was the first time I'd ever seen one on the trail. So I really wanted to take their picture, but then I felt weird. And so I asked her, and then she got all, you could she said yes, but you could tell that she didn't like it. And so I didn't take her picture, I just took the llama's picture. And then I was like, well, darn, she was sort of so mean about it. I wish I'd just taken the picture like on the side and not asked her. But I'm like,
what does she expect? She's hiking with like a cool animal.
I know. If you're hiking with a llama, you're gonna have to expect people want pictures, right?
Gosh.
Okay, we're getting off topic here.
I do that. I'm a New Yorker, so you got to keep me on track.
That's okay. I think it was me. Okay, so I want you sent me some answers to some questions beforehand, just so our listeners know. I want to know about the first book you ever wrote, because this was a really cool story to me.
I actually just did a TikTok video on that, and people loved it. But so I was in college, I was dating my boyfriend, who's now my husband. I was an art major, I was broke, and I needed to get him a birthday present. So I thought, how cool would it be if I created a character based off of him and wrote a story? So I created this character, Avatar, which is the main character in my YA epic fantasy series, but I only wrote like 15 pages, but I binded it in my art class and I made it into like an actual book. And then I gave it to him on his birthday. He loved it. He was so pissed that I didn't write any more of the story. So then I was like, well, you know what? Maybe I'll just, and I always wrote when I was younger. I still have my 40-page pirate adventure that I wrote in like 5th grade. Then use the bathroom upstairs. So I from there, I started working on Broken Forest, and it just spirals off. And what's funny is that the series that me and my husband co-write now, which is in a different world, kind of like an alternate Earth type style, he stole my characters. He stole Avatar back and dropped him in that world. And let me tell you, I don't know if I knew he was I think I knew he was doing it. And I was like, he made him like a chromomancer that kind of like goes between worlds and stuff. But the way he wrote him when he comes in with the swords, and it's like, oh man, I was like, this is the coolest thing in the world. So it's really come full circle from me creating that story about him to writing a full completed series, from him falling in love with that story. And then, like 10 years later, he steals 3 of my characters from that world and starts putting it in our new world. So it's a really cool thing.
That is a very cool story. And do you guys work together well? I mean, or do you have problems?
Yes.
Or does it work well?
No, he's gotten a lot better with my edits. I think the biggest thing we argue about is he's a bit of a perv and I'm not. So we've really had to kind of come together, and I definitely have pushed back on certain things. I'm like, you cannot put that. I moved the series from YA to adult because book 2, I'm like, well, this is not YA anymore. And then I did an author note and explained, if you were to take like Lee Bardugo from Shadow and Bone and Lovecraft and like create a world, like that's kind of where we're at. So he's always been involved with my stories. When I first started writing, I really struggled with fight scenes, and I would just kind of give them to him because he took martial arts. He used to be a dungeon master in D&D. He's a hip hop artist, so he would, poetry wise and everything. And he would take my 1-page like scene and turn it into 5 pages. And I'll never forget my critique partner in Crimson Tides. There's a fight and it's like a whole chapter, and she emails me and tells me, that was so amazing. Oh my God. And I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, I totally did write that. So, we've really, I've been with him for almost like 20 years. We've been married, 12, I don't know, around there. It's been a long time. So yeah, so we really work well when it comes to writing, as long as he just don't sit down.
Yeah, it sounds like you really complemented each other in that way.
Yeah.
So for listeners, so they can make sure they have it straight in their head, let's go through your series. So you have the Death Chronicles, is that how you pronounce it?
The Death Chronicles, yep.
And
that's
that
completed.
is, sorry?
I was saying that's the completed series.
Okay, and that's a YA series.
Mm-hmm.
And these are shapeshifters, right?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit more about that Death series.
So again, I get obsessed with something and steal it. I'm just gonna flat out admit it. I was going through a V stage. Do you remember the movie V in the
Yes.
series V with the reptilians? And I was all into like the conspiracy theories about reptilians. And so the shapeshifters are reptilians, and they're invading from another world. So I took like the concept of kind of like aliens invading and mingling in with humans. But of course, I don't want lizard men. So I made them look more like elves with like draconic, like kind of dragon skin that, you find out later in the books. But yeah, so that was the concept, because I wanted to do a little bit something different than just the normal shifter.
Very cool. And then your second series is Spartan Academy, and this is the one you write with your husband, correct?
Yes.
And is
that
that
is and actually he mainly writes it. We plotted the first book together, and then he just sort of took it and ran with it, and then we've been editing, and I've gone in and fixed a couple of scenes and stuff. But yeah, that I'm gonna tell you right now, that book is it's got heavy themes, so a lot of the occult, supernatural type stuff. It's dark, it's violent, there's definitely like a Lovecraft element. The monsters are so gross. He has this, what in the first book, there's one monster and he like describes it as like fresh mozzarella, and I'm like, so it's I always tell people who follow me, like, here's the warning, do not at me or get mad at me. Like, you have been warned if you're getting into this series. So yeah, that one's a bit dark.
But it sounds like fun horror.
Yeah, it's an urban fantasy, and it really bounces around. There's so many characters, you've got vampires, but these vampires are like demonic. These are not sparkly. These are not like, the bad guys in here are bad guys you hate. They're not a likable, they're not morally gray, like they're straight up evil. So that's kind of where like the dark, heavy stuff comes in, is because the villains are really portrayed in a villainous way.
Right. They don't have those redeeming qualities that, some of our most of our YA villains end up having for one reason or another.
Yep.
Because in YA, we can't totally believe that anything is really, really evil. Maybe that's part of it. I don't know.
Yeah. I would definitely say that when I look at that compared to, say, the Death Chronicles or Daughter of the Swan, the kind of bad elements are there, still not as freaky deaky and evil and like repulsive as the ones in the series.
And then Daughter of the Song is in Unholy Magic Saga, correct?
Yes.
And is that a complete series?
No, it would have been, but I actually almost quit writing when the first book came out, because that was a series. Yeah, it was, I'm not a quitter, but I think part of, I do this because I love it. Like, I have a very amazing corporate day job. So from a stability standpoint, that's not going anywhere. So this is always something I do because I love. And I had worked really hard. I had a mentor for the series, and I had everything planned out. I had everything set. And then day one of my release, one of my ARC readers immediately put up a 1-star review because the book had zombies and she was not aware that it had zombies, and she doesn't like zombies. And it killed. I mean, it took, by the time like day 4, you published, so by the time day 4 came up and the other reviews came in, like those first couple of days of release. So my husband flipped out. He was calling Amazon, like freaking out, like, take it down. That one was tough. And then it was actually my editor who, I was working on Hunter of the Swan and I had it outlined, I was writing it, but I was really still struggling just because it left I had such high hopes for the story, and it just left a bad taste in my mouth. And I was stressed out about bills from that release and everything else. And my editor was like, you need to write this. I'm not going to charge you. Just get it to me and we need to get it out there. And I was like, well, if that isn't a sign to keep going, then I don't know what is. And so I pushed through it and I wrote it. And then, and then I wrote the next book. And then my plan was originally to have both out this year, but we all got COVID last year and I had like the worst brain fog for months. So I just could not focus. I could not write. So it just kind of scrambled everything up, but yeah.
Well, I'm excited for that series to continue then.
Yeah, and one more book and then it's done. But my husband also stole Leo and put him in his book.
That's cool. I love when series crossover.
Yeah,
and I can't let characters go.
Yep. And then I stole one of his vampires and put it in the end of book 3, and she'll be in book 4.
Okay, fun. Well, I'll look for that because I've read the first 2. I haven't read the 3rd one yet, so I need to pick it up. I have to look on my cheat sheet because I had some really cool questions. I asked you about your first book. Oh, I like this. What inspired you to write? What was your first writing experience?
My first writing experience. Well,
or maybe when you were a kid, what inspired you to write?
So I think I just always wrote when I was a kid, and I used to write stories about my friends, which I still have. And I think what got me into writing was I remember reading Choose Your Own Adventure books and falling in love with that's what got me into reading. And I remember reading them really young and I was just obsessed. And I just loved, that whole concept of adventure. And so I just started, and they make you write little stories in school and stuff, but I just wrote these little stories with me and my friends. And I still have those stories, believe it or not. I have one folder that every once in a while, when I feel like I suck, I pick out my folder and I just look at all these little stories, and like paper's like crumbling, but it's just one of those things that I think is kind of, you always have. My kids are showing things under.
Yeah, I really like those adventure books too. I would like flip to the pages, and yeah, it was fun.
Yep.
And do you read in fantasy too, or what authors do you love?
So I do read in fantasy, but I don't like reading in the genre that I'm currently writing in, because I'm always leery that I'm gonna either read something, go upstairs then. I'm gonna read something and be like, oh my God, my writing sucks. Why am I even writing? So usually I try to read in my downtime, and you gotta go upstairs, buddy. My son is freaking out. There's 3 bathrooms in the house, by the way. So it really depends, but I try not to read in the same genre that I'm writing in. As I'm like writing the story, if I'm editing, it's different, but as I'm developing the story, I like to not mix my genres.
Yeah, I just read a Fae Fantasy, and I had never read any fairy, just like Sirens. I had never read. Sorry, she's not a siren. She has a singing power, we'll say. I had never, like that genre, I had never read the Fae genre. So after my book published, like people kept comparing it to other Fae books, and I was like, well, I had no idea what I was doing, but I guess it was a good thing because my Fae are not like, I mean, they're similar. Obviously, people know about fairies from, Pinocchio, but
sorry, I'm keeping myself on mute when you're talking so you don't get background noise.
No, that's okay.
My son is refusing to go upstairs.
We can wrap it up quick though. This is my favorite question to ask authors. What do you want your readers to take away from? What is super cool for you?
Here, give me a sec. I'm just gonna go. You had to go to the bathroom. Go.
Do you want to pause?
Oh boy, it's like a mess out here.
Well, and we could pause, and then we can.
Yeah, no, I'm good. I'm gonna hold it. Oh, where'd you go? No, hold on. There you are. Okay. Okay. Sorry about that. So, what was the question again?
What do you want your readers to take away from your books? Like, what do you want them to experience when they're reading?
I want them to just have fun. Be able to just, I love books that I can just gobble up in a day. So my books are all pretty short compared to some. Like, I don't like things to drag on. I want to be able on a Saturday, if I get into a story, be able to pound through that book in like a day. So I want my books to be an adventure that they can just get lost in, not something that, I mean, obviously some of my books are a little bit heavier in the topics, but I would say the majority of it just, get lost in the story, have a warm, fuzzy feeling, and enjoy yourself like a movie.
Yeah, and I can vouch for that with Daughter of the Song, definitely. So I think you achieved that goal. So tell us where we can find you, Eliza.
So, like I said before, and again, I'm sorry because now the dog's bothering. It's always something. I'm on TikTok. TikTok is where I hang out the most. So definitely, if you're on TikTok, go on there. You can find me on Facebook. You can friend me there. I am on Instagram, but I don't post on there. And when I do, it's just reposted TikToks.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And now they're all done, and now I can go back. Sorry. This is why I don't do interviews, and I never interview with people because it's always like a crapshoot.
Well, thank you for being here. There you are. You're back.
Oh, there you are. Okay. I know my internet connection got unstable. It didn't like me moving around a lot.
No worries. But thank you again for being here, and I will read your next book, and then we can talk again.
Well, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Have a good night.
You too. Bye.
Bye.